Here.
McBride, Mackey, Walker,
Present.
Livingston,
Present.
English, Newton,
Here.
O'Walker, Horatio.
All right, next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Let's move to properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Barron,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Been approved.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And before we get into the presentation, I just think it's important to highlight for the public that this is the first of 3 budget work sessions. We hold, these sessions annually before we pass a budget, and the aim is to hear from the administrator as well as his team regarding the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as to give council members an opportunity to ask questions or have any of their concerns addressed. So with that in mind, next item on the agenda is item 3, which is presentation of the fiscal year 23-24 grant funds for consideration. So Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, this is a process that's in place to allow there to be a public discussion, a public share of information, transparent communication, as well as transparent information share with not only members of the public, but really any member of our community and our society who is interested in how Richland County conducts its financial business. Our recommended budget is on the county's website. You can find it under the Budget and Grants Management section of the county's website. And traditionally, Richland County has been recognized for its budgets. And so I just wanted to communicate that to you as members of council, that this is an overall process that is in really compliance with one of our current strategic goals, which is good governance. This is a good governance process. And what I would like to do at this point in time is I'm actually going to remove from my seat and allow our budget director, Mr. Abi Deshpande, to come before you and to present the grant portion of the fiscal year 23-24 budget. So, Mr. Chair, with that being said, Mr. Deshpande, would you come forward, sir, take the seat?
Recognize Ms. Newton.
Quick question. Mr. Deshpande, for my information for this conversation, will we be reviewing this presentation or will we be reviewing the booklet?
The presentation, ma'am.
Thank you.
Oh, no, we will run that. Okay. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the members of the council. For the record, my name is Abi Deshpande, Director of Budget and Grants Management. And the way that we plan for this presentation is I will give you a brief overview about our grant recommendations for FY23. And with me, I have Ms. Denise Tisdale. She's our manager of budget as well as interim grants manager. So she will go through some of the guidelines and the procedures about the grants and the grant applications and the approval process, as well as some of the details about the any kind of grant recommendations. So with that, next slide, please. So as you know that we have various different parts of funds that we use to make grant decisions and grant making to various different organizations. So the first part is the general fund lump sum appropriations. So FY23 recommendations for budget recommendations are for this particular part is 1,048,939. So after this, some of the sub items under this part is basically discretionary grant, that the discretionary grant committee makes those decisions, which are TBD right now. So we are waiting to receive their grant recommendations. Then the another sub-item under this part is contractual and statutory agencies. The recommendation for that sub-item is $848,326. And then there are some outside agencies that we received applications for, or the requests for grants, which decisions are not made yet. The next part is the Accommodation Tax Appropriations. These are the grant applications, again, made by a tax committee, which we have not received those decisions yet. But as per our revenue projections for FY23, for A-tax revenues, our projections are $400,000 for FY23. As you can see there, the FY22 budget for this particular A-tax appropriation was $100,000. Definitely, we are seeing the uptrend in that particular tax revenue collection. So hence, we are increasing our revenue projections for FY23. Next slide, please. Moving forward, the next part of funds are neighborhood improvement grant awards. Basically, these are the grants made by or decisions are recommended by Neighborhood Improvement Committee. This is a special revenue fund. FY23 budget recommendations are $100,000. Out of that, the grant recommendations are total grant recommendations are $75,775. Out of the total requests, the grant committee received was $80,506. Moving forward, the next part is like we have Richland County Conservation Commission Grants Awards. These are the grant recommendations or grant recommended are from the RCC committee. Again, the Special Revenue Fund FY23 budget recommendations are $250,000. The grant recommendations total are $250,000. Out of they received $449,000 and $715,000 of total dollar for the application. The next kind of it's not like a fund, but basically they fall under the various different grants, the grant request or kind of county match and the personal liability that that county may face as a result of grant requests made by various departments from outside sources. So the total we have received from various departments about the kind of grants they are trying to secure in upcoming fiscal year. Mostly these grants are from the federal sources or maybe state revenue. If they are mostly in the federal revenue, then they will be falling on the federal calendar year, and there could be some kind of county grant match component along with the federal dollars. So as a total for this grant, the grant full-time requests for the FTE positions are like 46.5 positions. Totaling the cost is $3.162,159 as a cost of that FTE. In terms of the departmental general fund match requests on the general fund side, our FY23 budget recommendations are $400,017. But however, the general fund match requests are like totaling $456,562. Keep in mind that these grants, as I said, that could be on the federal calendar, so we may not be using the 12-month cost for these FTE positions. And the enterprise fund positions are kind of grant request, and their grant match per portion was $3,053,500. Moving forward. So this is our kind of last and one of the biggest part about the grant recommendation is hospitality tax appropriations. FY23 project revenue projections are 7.8 million. Out of that 7.8 million, $4,485,600 will be transferred out to the general fund as well as the debt service fund. HTAX committee recommendations, they make 500,000 of grant recommendations. However, those are again, the HTAX committee's the applications are under review. The recommendations are not made yet. Then council district discretionary allocations, which is basically every district gets 82,425,000 per year, totaling 906 and 675. That also falls under this part. Then out of that 7.8 million, the reserve for contingency will be 150,000. And then there are other subcategories that fall under the HTAX part is basically ordinance agencies, special promotions, and the tier 3 promotions. We do not have any recommendations. Administration doesn't have any recommendations at this point, but those are the decisions that council will have to make. Moving forward. That's pretty much a big overview about the grant recommendations. If you don't have any questions at this point, I will turn it over to Ms. Steesdale.
Mr. Livingston, you're recognized.
Yes, going back to the very first page where we started talking about the general lump sum appropriations, and we moved to some other ones too. It'd be helpful for me to know when we're talking about the budget there, to give me an idea of what was budgeted in fiscal year 22. So I have a good idea of comparing this year to last year. That'd be helpful for me.
Yes, sure. And the recommended budget book talks about all the details. If I
okay. If it's in the recommended budget book, I'm good.
Yeah. So so you will have the last year's number to compare with in the recommended budget book. Yeah.
Questions from the body? Recognized.
Just a quick question. I think the slide changed. There was a last bullet point under discretionary funds that said there, thank you, that said funds will not roll over. There, I'm presuming you're talking about the external grants to other agencies?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barron, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to discretionary grants and such, these are all organizations who have made application to us. Is that correct?
For the lump sum agencies, yes. These are the ones that we have not made any kind of decisions yet. Yes.
And then the other ones come to us how? Please remind me.
On the one.
So you have the accommodations tax.
Oh, so
and hospitality tax.
Oh, okay. So the accommodation tax and hospitality tax also, like we receive their applications from the Zoom grant. So basically, and Denise, correct me if I'm wrong. So the lump sum appropriation applications also come through Zoom grant. Is that right?
No, they don't come from the industry.
Okay. So the definitely HTAX and ATAX application, they come from the Zoom grant as well.
Okay, but you do have some individuals who make come through administration, or so they don't necessarily have to come through the Zoom grant and apply.
Those are in the lump sum, yes.
Okay, but we don't have anyone who's listed here on this in our book. I want to be real clear. They either made proposal or they made application.
That's right. In the lump sum, they may have made request through administration, or in A tax or H tax, they may have put an application from the Zoom grant.
Thank you.
You recognize Ms. Newton?
All right. Just to clarify, and Ms. Barron, were you talking about in the book or in the presentation? I just want to make sure I refer to the right thing.
I was speaking about what's in the book. The book gives specifics.
Gotcha. So, because like, for example, I'm looking at, just to pick a random page, page 11 in your presentation, where there are organizations that are listed here under the lump sum appropriations. My impression is that some of these organizations have made requests, but other organizations, it's historical data. So whether it was a council member that did, they may not have made the ask, someone may have made it on their behalf. So I need your help to ask the question that I would like to ask you about lump sum appropriations, which is the way that I'm reading this information. Administration is not making a recommendation about the majority of these organizations, but rather it looks like you're only making recommendations for organizations where we have statutory obligations. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So then my next question would be whether it's a number that's in this presentation or a number in this book. Sometimes council has, for lack of a better term, borrowed money or taken money from other places to pay for these lump sum appropriations. My question is, are you providing a number, or have you provided a number that says this is the amount of lump sum appropriations that you could provide without having to borrow from reserves or other sources? Does my question make sense?
And it does make sense. And the way that, the lump sum appropriation, total appropriation number is like 1 million. Out of that, the contractual and statutory agencies, that grant awards, those are accounting around 800 and something thousand.
Right.
So basically you get only 200,000 there.
Okay.
For the discretionary. If you are going to make any other recommendations for the lump sum agency, that's where I think you're talking about the use of fund balance.
Okay.
We have not recommended use of fund balance at this point to make any kind of grant decisions for the lump sum appropriation.
Thank you. So based on what you said, it sounds like if I go to the right page or whatever, I'll find that what you're providing as a suggestion in our budget amount is somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000.
Yeah, 200,000 for the discretionary grant committee. So that's where they will make the decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Also, let the record reflect, Madam Clerk, that Ms. Yvonne McBride, Councilwoman McBride, is present. You want Mr. Anders?
Yep. So if you don't have any question at this point, I will turn it over to Ms. Teasdale, and she will go through some of the policy and the procedure guidelines, as well as some of the details of the line item about the grant decisions, the grant recommendations.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Denise Teasdale. I am the manager of budget / interim grant manager. So we're going to start with slide 5. And what I want to do is just go over a couple of the guidelines for our discretionary.
Teasdale, just 1 minute. Can someone help with her mic, please?
Is that a little bit better? Can you adjust it? Is that better? It's still too low? Okay. Okay.
And now, Madam Clerk, also while we're working on, I guess, the volume there, I just received a message from Councilman Joe Walker that he is also present, but he's attending via Zoom. So I want to recognize his presence as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hear from you, Councilman.
Test. Is that better? Is that better? Okay.
Yeah, and Ms. Tisdale, before you begin, also would like to recognize Councilwoman English. She is present virtually as well.
Okay. So we're going to start with our discretionary fund. And just keep in mind that majority of these, when we ask organizations to apply to be considered for funding, we do have where they go into Zoom grants and apply for discretionary funds, and that's the $200,000 that we're speaking of. Also, in order to receive lump sum allocations, we do ask that they submit I think my mic went off. Did it go off? Oh, okay. Okay, we do ask that they submit a Richland County application. So we are gathering information in all areas, whichever grant that we're speaking of. We also ask that organizations receiving accommodation tax funds to not be considered for, if they're receiving accommodation tax funds, we do ask them not to ask for lump sum allocations as well, because we don't want them to pretty much double dip is what it is. All expenses should directly relate to the project or program that is outlined in the application. We try our best to make sure that organizations stick with the budget that they have and they follow through and follow suit with the outline that they have provided for us. And for our discretionary, the $200,000, we just wanted to let everyone know and just to keep in mind that Richland County Council makes those awards. That comes directly from council members. And these funds for the agencies do not roll over, but that's just for the discretionary grant that is afforded by the council, the $200,000. Next slide, please. And our guidelines for our accommodation is pretty much the same. We do require application in Zoom grants, and these applications from these organizations, we ask that the organizations be in existence for 1 year. We also ask that they provide their nonprofit status, and they have to fall into a certain criteria. And we're just trying to make sure that we're following all the guidelines according to the ordinance that we have. Also, an approved committee they're the ones that make the recommendations for these awards. And these are persons that have been approved and appointed by council. And also these funds do not roll over. Hospitality, again, is in Zoom grants. We do ask that organizations be in existence for 1 year. We also ask that the program event in our ordinance, it states that they need to draw tourism into unincorporated areas of Richland County. We also ask that the program draw tourists who will eat in restaurants and bars that are in Richland County. We also add that they provide proof of their nonprofit status, and this is also another grant that will be awarded by an assigned committee that's approved by council. And these funds also don't roll over. And these are the required documents that we ask that all organizations that are asking for hospitality funds to adhere to. And the way it's set up in our Zoom grant software, if they don't submit all of these applications, their application will not be submitted. And just our processing our hospitality grant awards. What we have noticed that some of the allocations that we receive don't have details. So sometimes it takes us a little time to find out who the organization is. We always get the event and the name and a phone number, but we don't get the organization. So that takes us time to go and look for them. So, and a lot of times when the numbers that we have, they don't immediately respond. So we ask that when allocating funds from your district that you allow us at least 14 days before we send it to the council chair, before we send it to the clerk's office to verify that they are eligible for funds before we approve them and then have to go back and tell them that they're not approved, that they're not eligible. We also ask that all allocations be made no later than May 1st. Our year ends June 30th, and trying to get organizations approved and getting award letters and grant agreements to them sometimes can take up to 30 days before they even receive their payment requests. So if they're not getting their payment request until June 1st, they only have about 30 days to spend their money. And we are able to reimburse them for their hospitality funds. So as long as they have their receipts for the event, we're able to reimburse them. But we do ask that all allocations be awarded at least by May 1st. And lastly, we ask that our grant recipients, we ask them to have their all of their invoices to us by June 1st, because by our year ending June 30th, it takes us time to process their request. It has to go through certain procedures, and we just want to make sure that they are receiving their funds in a timely manner. And that is pretty much all the guidelines. I wanted to talk to you about the pages on page 10. And it's actually page 10 through 12. And these are our lump sum appropriations for discretionary and contractual and statutory. If you note, there are some asterisks in front or behind some of them. The ones that have asterisks that are 1, those are our CNS, our contract and statutory ordinance that we must pay. And then the one that has 2, those are applications that have been received in Zoom grants for the discretionary fund. And there are very minimum recommendations here. The discretionary committee has not submitted their recommendations yet for that grant. And if there aren't any questions between 10 and 12, I can go ahead and move to 13 and 18. And these are pages that are in your recommended budget book.
Any questions from the body? Ms. McBride, you're recognized. Yes, ma'am.
This is just for clarification, and someone else may be able to answer it if you can't. Regarding the hospitality funds, we have to abide by state rules. Is that how these the requirements are developed?
Yes, ma'am. We have an ordinance in place. Yes,
It's a state.
yes, ma'am. It
Okay.
is.
State mandate. Okay.
Mhm.
So that means that even though we might want to change these requirements, we can't because it's mandated.
Yes, ma'am. And that does sometimes have us call back an organization that has been awarded funds, telling them that they don't qualify. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Other questions from the body? All right. Thank you, Ms. Teasdale.
Now, I can go over the rest of the pages that for the accommodations and hospitality grants, but we don't have any recommendations because the committees have not, they have not submitted the recommendations yet. But you also, if you go to page, and I know I'm skipping pages and I apologize, but I didn't want to waste your time, and we don't have any recommendations for accommodation, discretionary, and hospitality. But we do have, for our NIP, our Neighborhood Improvement Program, you do have the recommendations before you.
Mackie, you're recognized.
Thank you. Ms. Teasdale, can we go back to page 11?
Yes, ma'am.
And just could you provide some information about LRADAC? So I see a dollar amount there in the column, but don't see an asterisk by them. Are they considered CNS or?
Ma'am, they are.
Okay, so there should be an asterisk there.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Just
I
wanted
was
to make
going
sure.
to clarify that, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dale, I'm looking here, 11, and I see Housing Trust Fund, fiscal year 21, 100,000 was approved. But of course, in fiscal year 22, nothing was that. Can you speak to that at all?
There was not an application submitted for it. Yes, sir.
Sure. All right. And Housing Trust Fund, do we know which organization that is, or
That's the actual housing trust fund.
actual Housing Trust
Yes.
Fund?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Recognize Ms. McBride.
Just following up on the housing trust fund. We submit.
They actually applied last year.
Oh, that's the,
Yes, ma'am.
for the neighborhood improvement matching grant programs.
Yes, ma'am.
Page 15. Now, this program is different from the hospitality and accommodations program because these are guidelines that we as a council develop.
Yes, ma'am.
So at any point, we can come in and make changes to these guidelines. Is that not?
If I could refer to Mr. Cooks, he is in the planning department.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. McBride, Brian Crooks, Planning Services Manager. So that would be correct. So the guidelines for the neighborhood matching, or excuse me, the neighborhood enrichment grant now, those were approved by County Council. We made recent changes to that back in the last calendar year, I believe September, October or so, for the new neighborhood enrichment grants, which added the new level tier 2 funding. So those would be changes that relates to the guidelines that council would have to approve. Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to make a comment regarding the neighborhood improvement grants, which includes the enrichment grants, that I have received a number of calls regarding it's a bit more complicated rather than being made more simpler. It's more complicated for these community people who are not professional grant writers to complete. And many of them are senior citizens because that's who are most active in writing these grants and in implementing them. So I would like to request that the council at least take another look for this year at the neighborhood improvement grants. Mr. Chair.
You loud and clear, Ms. McBride. Any additional questions? All right. Ms. Tisdale, if we can just go back to page 11, the Housing Trust Fund, when I asked about that question, you said that was the Housing Trust Fund. Is that the Midlands Housing Trust Fund? Is that the organization?
Yes,
okay. I was just wondering when you said the Housing Trust Fund.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions from the body for Ms. Tisdale? Okay, there being none. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, our presentation ends here. So we'll stop here unless you have any additional questions or go through any kind of line items, any other questions regarding the administration's grant recommendations for FY23.
Additional questions from the body or comments? And I know that we have some colleagues of ours who are attending virtually, so it's impossible to see if any of them have their hand raised. But Madam Clerk, if you could tell me if the Councilwoman English or Councilman Joe Walker, if they have any questions or if their hands are raised.
I do not, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. English? English? You can unmute yourself, Councilwoman. Okay. Anything to say then? Guess that's my cue. All right. Well, next, Ms. Mackey, you're recognized.
Thank you. And sorry, I don't know if this is Ms. Teasdale or not, but for the Hospitality Tax Committee applications, can you tell me what was the deadline for these applications that were shown here?
I believe.
We start receiving applications the first Monday in December, and the deadline is the first Sunday in February.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Comments? All right. Will there be none? Well, I want to say thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Deshpande, as well as Ms. Tisdale and Ms. Thomas, the entire team, just for your effort in putting this together for us. Thank you for the presentation. And if there's no further business, next item on the agenda is item 4. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Barron,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
O'Walker,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Motion approved to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned.